Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 7 preview, and it's a great time to actually stop and probably ask why you shouldn't wildcard or why you should wildcard. In my opinion, I usually do the Game Week 7 preview just asking questions about what to do in terms of prioritizing your transfers in each position in the priority spot. But this week, I think the first topic is about my opinions on the wildcard and why I think you should just wait 1 week at least if you have tremendous FOMO over certain assets, right? If you have, let's say, FOMO over Spurs assets and you're owning players like Sterling, like I do, and I have a little bit of jealousy over Madison and Son owners. If you're, let's say, owning an Mbumo who's looked pretty disastrous in the last 2 games, I still think this is a great week to actually just dead end your team in Game Week 7, particularly double Game Week 7. And the reason why is because you have an opportunity to attack this game week, right? You can actually go into a Luton player or even a Burnley player if you really want to go for, let's say, a goalkeeper, a little bit more of a differential shout, and actually just dead end your team completely. And then you actually never have to see these Luton players or even Burnley players ever again. And it's quite a convenient opportunity to do so. Whereas, let's say, if you're wildcarding this week, what's very tough is this isn't even a good week to go against the Haaland captaincy. I would probably be very tempted to still captain Haaland this week. Whereas in other weeks after this one, there's very good opportunities to captain against Haaland, right? So let's say if you're wildcarding on Game Week 8, which as I said, if you have a lot of FOMO for Spurs, you can do that. You can still go for, once again, another punt towards Son, go for another punt towards even Madison if you're tempted to do so. And even Salah arguably could have a better Game Week 8 game. Whereas in this week in Game Week 7, quite tough to sort of justify that. Maybe Salah still has a better game than Haaland, but it's so close that I probably wouldn't do the captaincy there. And so that's sort of my opinion as well. It's all about the fixture swings of teams like Aston Villa, like a Tottenham, and like Liverpool. So Aston Villa obviously have a tough game in hand. It's Game Week 7 here. You're looking at an opportunity to actually invest into cash, but this is not a good week to own cash. In fact, I'd probably actually prefer Estupiñán, who we all have on the bench, and probably play him ahead of cash this week because I just really struggle to see that this Brighton team would not be able to break the clean sheet of Aston Villa, even though they're away from home. And as far as, let's say, looking at a player like Watkins, this Brighton team, despite them being so poor defensively, and I just think it's still a tough week to go into because the way the Brighton play at times, sometimes they also step up versus stronger opposition, which is a very odd thing, but something that we've seen from Brighton lately. If you look at, for example, their European performance recently, that would probably tell you the same sort of story. And we've seen results, for example, like the Everton result last season. That's not a result that you'd often see, for example, with a leading team like Man City. And ultimately, Brighton are a leading team. So this is sort of how I see things. If you go for, let's say, waiting for a week, go for a punt towards Morris or some of these double game weekers this week. You can then call it quits for players like Sterling, who still has a good fixture, and Mbumo, who still has a good fixture. And then you can actually safely move towards players who actually have a good fixture next week, like a Watkins, like a Diaby, like a Cash. If you're interested in Salah, you also have another opportunity to actually assess. Maybe you can actually, instead of going for Watkins, go for Nunez on the wild card. See if Darwin gets another 80-minute start, because if Darwin actually gets a lot of minutes, getting more information over whether he could actually consistently get good minutes in the future is also an additional thing. You might even also want to assess whether or not you are interested in going to someone like Trent or even Robertson ahead of time, or just simply Virgil van Dijk as well, because he could be an interesting pick going forwards. So that's my opinion on Liverpool. Now, of course, Liverpool's game week swing is probably more around 9, but it's actually quite perfect to actually build the team around mostly these Spurs players, mostly these Aston Villa players, and probably actually bin off maybe Saka for at least 2 weeks, or maybe, of course, bin off your Man United midfielders who actually seem like they're underperforming as well. So if you actually really want to keep Saka desperately, I think a midfield that's very strong next week is something like Saka, Madison, Rashford, Salah plus another pick. Maybe it's actually Eze, right? Because on Game Week 8, he's got a home fixture, which is quite nice. Or you just simply go for Diaby, who also has a home fixture, and it's quite nice on Game Week 8. But on Game Week 7, that's not really the case. Everyone kind of has a weak fixture, and maybe you actually just want to see Mbumo last it out with his last good fixture, and then you move into another 6-point-X asset who's actually quite good. So those are my opinions in terms of why you shouldn't wildcard. Now, the next question is going to be in the midfield position. So the midfield position is sort of about Spurs FOMO, right? Or even Salah FOMO. I would say it's very similar to the logic of why I wouldn't wildcard into Game Week 7. Yes, of course, you can actually go from Sterling to Madison this week, or if you have the cash, for example, in the bank to go from Sterling to Son, or even Rashford to Son. I think you can do it, but I'd probably practice a little bit of patience this week. It's a very good fixture for Rashford. Yes, of course, Crystal Palace, we know them as a good defense, but actually away from home, they're not a particularly good defense. And actually, this is a good opportunity, as I said, to sort of part ways with this Man United team as well, because Brentford is probably going to be a slightly tougher fixture, and the fixture swing truly is next week. Now, you can probably look at the North London derby as a good example to say that the Spurs team can actually score versus any team, and that's fair enough, yes, but ultimately, I do struggle with the idea of actually going into Madison and Son this week, just because we all have some issues in our team. And I think with the upside that you have this week, it's probably actually better still to roll the transfer so you can make more powerful moves on game week 8, or just simply go into, let's say, a cheaper asset this week if you're, let's say, trying to build a team in preparation of Salah. So for example, if you actually get whined with the news that Gordon can start, then maybe moving to Gordon is better, because Gordon versus Burnley at home is going to be a better fixture than let's say, just simply targeting Son versus Son and Madison this week. Particularly if you have players like Mbeumo and Sterling, who probably have their last good fixture. You could argue Sterling obviously has a good fixture on game week 8 as well, but with Mbeumo, I think that's more so the case in game week 7, where this is his last good game, and then it's obviously United, then of course another good game, but by that time you might already want out of Mbeumo. So that's my opinion. I do think midfield is a position where you could practice patience. Remember, of course, that this Spurs team just blanked versus Sheffield United at home as well. So we shouldn't change our opinions that quickly with players. And I think obviously if you wanna exercise on that FOMO, I would say exercise it on game week 8. As far as the forward position, what I would do this week is probably think about just simply going towards Morris if you are really lacking in a forward. If you made the move from Jackson to Alvarez last week, don't be upset. I think the reality is this is how football outcomes work. How often are you going to predict that Rodri is going to make a fool of himself and actually get that silly red card? I really don't think you could have called it. And that was the only reason why Julian Alvarez was taken off and hooked off, right? He's played a lot of minutes lately, and Pep saw it as an opportunity to put another defender in to consolidate the result. But if you actually look at the chances, if you look at the underlying shots, I mean, Foden didn't really have any opportunities compared to Julian Alvarez, who literally had 4 or 5 great ones in the first half, and you probably could have feasted in the second half too. And the reality is this Wolves away game is still perfect. I would not be moving from Alvarez to Morris at this time, unless you're trying to dead end your team and you really, really like the look of your midfield this week. What I would probably think about is actually, if you have the opportunity to dead end, think about maybe a 4.5 forward to Morris this week and then benching a midfielder instead. Now, if you didn't go for Alvarez and you already have Morris, obviously, I don't really think you have many transfers to do. In fact, you can probably think about maybe upgrading a keeper, upgrading a defender, and dead-ending like so. Now, alternatively, if you actually want another forward transfer and you want to ignore Morris altogether because you're planning for the future and you're actually, someone who already wildcarded or someone who just doesn't want to deal with, let's say, Morris in and Morris out as a transfer, what you can actually do and try to think about is maybe going for a little bit more of a stable long-term pick. And I think this is the time to still maybe think about going for Watkins or, as I said, Darwin Nunez, right? Because if you go for Watkins, yes, of course, you're starting with a bad fixture on paper versus Brighton, but at least it's a home fixture. And then actually Watkins has a great run of fixtures anyway. So this is a good opportunity to do so. Now, if you're dead ending this week, I actually like, as a differential to Morris, actually going for Callum Wilson once again, because this week you've got another great fixture. It's going to be Burnley at home. Wilson has been fantastic, pretty much scored every single game he starts. And this is a good opportunity once again to bank into a Wilson 1 week punt. And then you can wildcard, as I said, in game week 8 and just do the same thing there. So that's an opportunity to do so. In terms of a little bit more of a stable pick as well, I think I have been advocating for Højlund, and I do think he's going to get good minutes, so on. But the question, of course, is going to be, do you actually want to invest into this Man United team that seemed to be a little bit lower ceiling in terms of the attack compared to our initial expectations? So far, of course, I think Højlund is going to be an upgrade on anyone that United have played in the forward position the last 2 years, but that's really not that interesting, right? Ultimately, they weren't even able to create more than 1 XG versus Burnley, and this doesn't seem like a team that you want to invest in right now, even though they have a good fixture run. In fact, I'd probably invest in Man United defenders, and I'll talk about them just in a moment, over any more Man United attackers. So that's going to be my opinion on the forwards this week. Now, you could obviously go for some more budget players. This is a nice week to go for Awani as well, just because he's got a home fixture finally, and you can probably reinvest into him this week. So that's another option too, but I do feel like it's a little bit lower ceiling compared to, let's say, even just going for Alvarez 1 week later than everyone else, just because, with Nottingham Forest, they're going to have bad and good games, and there's going to be blanks for Awani coming. I don't know when, but it should come. Now, of course, he just blanked versus City as well, but you get what I mean. As far as the defender transfers this week, I do think this is an opportunity once again just to simply go for the Newcastle defenders. We've been talking about it for the last 2 weeks, and this is once again a good fixture for Newcastle. It's a better fixture than the Brentford game, and it's probably an equivalent fixture on paper to Sheffield. Now, probably I would say Burnley is going to defend set pieces a touch better than Sheffield United, because that performance, defending set pieces wise, is probably the worst that we've seen in the last few years. But it's a great opportunity to get a clean sheet for Newcastle. In fact, the clean sheet odds for the last 2 weeks have been very, very similar. So if you see it as an opportunity to actually get another Newcastle defender, make that move. If you see it as an opportunity to get your first Newcastle defender, make that move. If you actually want to get a third one, you could also make that move. But of course, keep in mind that West Ham away is just around the corner as well. So in a sense, you're a little bit late with the Newcastle transfers, but if you think about it, if you've got players like Udogie coming in game week 8, maybe you can actually cover for the fact that there's West Ham away game coming. So think about that too. I probably wouldn't invest into 3. I would be very happy with 2. My priority transfer target is always going to be Botman, and then it's going to be Trippier. I've said it for the last 2 weeks. Now, Burn obviously is on the radar because Botman's actually gotten so many price rises. I do think you can justify going for Burn. As I said, I do think he's a little bit more rotation prone than Botman, but I probably still don't want to squeeze that sort of money to Shar. I feel like, as I've said, you either squeeze all the way towards Trippier, crack your team open a little bit, but to actually get that best player, or you just kind of consolidate with a cheaper asset and just go for a Botman and Burn. So those are my opinions in terms of Newcastle. Now, if you don't want to go for Newcastle, let's say you already own 2 of their defenders and you're still looking for a third one this week, I do think this is an opportunity, as I said, instead of going for a Man United attacker that have been stinking lately, I think you can actually go for a Man United defender potentially, right? Because right now, the fullbacks are so cheap in terms of both Reguilon and Dalot. And if Reguilon is fit, for example, and he continues with the form that he's actually started off with as a loanee for this Man United team, I do think as long as you get the next few starts, maybe if you plan, let's say, a distant wild card like game week 10, he could be the perfect punt for 4.4, good attacking returns, getting into the box, getting attacking holes that, he hasn't actually showed up on paper, but so far he's been very interesting from that point of view. I do think Reguilon could be the one. Now, you can also go for Dalot if you want to play a little bit safer, because I think Dalot can cover both wings, and we know that Reguilon might even be injured. So, of course, Dalot could be the pick this week as well. He is a bit expensive, and I don't like the fact that he's a little bit more expensive than, let's say, Botman and even Burn. But you also have to think about game week 8, right? For example, 2 United home fixtures. If you need to plug a hole in game week 7, game week 8, Dalot might be your man. Now, on the other hand, if you don't really want to exercise the transfer this week, I would probably actually just go simply towards cash next week and just roll my transfer. Maybe if you have Estupiñán, just play him versus Aston Villa because you just know how attacking he is. It's still a good opportunity to play him against an Aston Villa team. So I would actually be quite tempted to go Estupiñán if I knew that he started. Another thing to talk about too, and a lot of people will say, is just dead end as well to a double game week player. I do think Kabore is still your guy for that sort of, double chance or double lottery chance at a clean sheet, because they actually have 2 fixtures where there is a small sliver of a chance where they can get a clean sheet compared to, let's say, Burnley defenders, where I don't think that Newcastle clean sheet is within touching distance. What you're expecting from that game is appearance points and hopefully not getting -4s from conceding 8 goals. So that's a tough thing with Newcastle. I'd probably avoid the Burnley defense altogether. But as I said, with Kabore, it's a good opportunity. He has been very attacking and actually gotten a lot of minutes lately. So if you want a dead end, maybe Kabore is your person. But if you're actually planning to not dead end, I would not go Kabore, definitely. Yes, of course, he can maybe improve your bench and maybe he can plug a hole. Unless you really just need game week 7 plugged in. That's it. Go Kabore then. But more than likely, you actually want to get a defender who actually has some good value on odd weeks in the future. And that's what Newcastle Man United defenders should bring you, provided obviously that they can actually start. And that's more so the case in terms of the Man United defenders, because you have to sort of keep track of, let's say, Shaw, Malacia, and Wan-Bissaka and their injury timelines. So that's going to be the long-winded Game Week 7 preview. I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. In terms of transfers, as I said, I do think this is a week where you can maybe roll, maybe assess. Go towards game week 8 if you're not planning a wild card and actually make some more powerful moves. Go into the Aston Villa players that you want. Go into the Spurs players that you want. And maybe you can even wait for game week 9 to go for Liverpool, because that's really where their fixture run starts as well. If you're wild carding for game week 8 or you want a wild card now, as I said, I'd probably hold that until game week 8. And that's going to be my opinions on this week. I hope you guys, if you guys can actually smash the like button, that would be lovely. Let's go for a target of 350 likes for this video. And I wish you guys a wonderful game week going forwards and, green arrows once again.